at the lavish Sterling Global Christmas party. CEO Astrid Sterling laughed coldly as she pointed toward the janitor standing near the stage. "Sing Last Christmas," she commanded, her voice dripping with mockery. The entire ballroom erupted in laughter. The man ducked his head, hands trembling as he took the microphone. But when he began singing in English, then continued flawlessly in 4 more languages, the laughter died completely. No one expected it. No one imagined that this moment of public humiliation would reveal a truth that left the CEO frozen in stunned silence. The champagne glasses had been clinking like ice breaking for hours, each crystalline note echoing through air thick with expensive perfume and barely disguised ambition. Snow pressed against the floor-to-ceiling windows 47 stories above Manhattan, turning the city below into a blur of white and gold. Inside Sterling Global Tower, the Christmas party blazed with enough light to shame the stars. A massive tree towered 30 feet high, draped in white lights and silver ornaments, each branch perfect, each decoration placed with deliberate precision. The string quartet played near the entrance, their instruments gleaming under chandeliers that cost more than most people earned in a year. Astrid Sterling stood at the center of it all, her black gown fitted like armor, her diamond earrings catching the light with every movement. Her smile was sharp as winter itself, the kind that made subordinates step back without understanding why. She had been holding court among board members and international investors when her gaze swept across the room and landed on a figure that did not belong. A man in a faded janitor's uniform, cleaning cart parked near the stage, trying to stay invisible while he cleared abandoned glasses. Something about his presence irritated her beyond reason, like a splinter under the skin she could not reach. When she pointed at him and commanded him forward, the crowd parted instinctively. His work boots sounded too loud against the polished marble. When he reached her, he kept his eyes down, the picture of practiced invisibility. That was when Astrid made her choice. That was when she decided to make an example of him, to remind everyone in the room exactly who held power and who did not. She gestured toward the stage where Beatrix Moore stood with a microphone, looking uncomfortable but obedient. "We're singing carols tonight," Astrid said, her voice carrying across the ballroom, "building team spirit. You know Last Christmas, don't you?" The question was not really a question. The room erupted in laughter, sharp and cutting. Someone whistled mockingly. Beatrix approached with the microphone, her expression apologetic but firm. This was her job. The man's fingers trembled as they closed around the device. The music started. Those familiar opening notes, syrupy and designed to evoke nostalgia. He looked down at the microphone, then up at hundreds of people waiting to laugh at him, their phones already raised. He took a breath, and when he opened his mouth, something shifted in the air. His voice was low and steady, rougher than it might have been once, but clear and true. He sang in English first, the lyrics simple and sad. But he was not stumbling. He was not off-key. He was actually good. The laughter began to falter. People exchanged confused glances. This was not going according to plan. Then, without pausing, without asking permission, the man shifted seamlessly into French. His pronunciation was flawless, his phrasing smooth as silk. Henry Caldwell, the European investor from Paris, set down his champagne with a sharp clink. He knew real fluency when he heard it. Spanish came next, the man's voice warming with the language, rhythm shifting into something passionate. Then German, precise and powerful, delivered with years of confidence. Then Italian, soft and aching, each syllable a small heartbreak. When the final note faded, the ballroom was completely still. Then the applause began, thunderous and genuine. The man stood center stage, breathing hard, looking as surprised as anyone. No one had expected this. No one knew what would unravel next. The party had started 3 hours earlier, when the first guests stepped off private elevators into a transformed world. The entire executive floor of Sterling Global Tower had been converted into something out of a winter dream. Every detail calculated to inspire awe and envy in equal measure. White roses climbed the marble columns, their petals perfect and cold. Ice sculptures depicting the company logo gleamed under strategic lighting, already beginning to weep into silver trays as the evening's heat built. A string quartet played Vivaldi near the entrance, their music providing an elegant backdrop to conversations conducted in multiple languages and currencies. Waiters in crisp white jackets glided between clusters of executives and international partners, offering trays of champagne and canapés that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Oysters on ice, caviar blinis, tiny works of culinary art that would be consumed in seconds and forgotten immediately. This was not just a celebration. This was a performance, staged with surgical precision by a woman who understood that in her world. Power was as much about perception as profit, and appearances could make or break billion-dollar deals before a single contract was signed. Astrid Sterling was 32 years old and had built her reputation on being faster, sharper, and colder than anyone else in any room she entered. She wore her authority like armor, never softening her voice for male comfort, never hesitating in boardroom battles where men twice her age tried to intimidate her into silence through sheer volume and condescension. She had clawed her way from middle management to the corner office in just under 6 years, leaving a trail of impressed investors and bitter rivals in her wake. She never apologized. She never showed weakness. She had learned early that in corporate America, women who hesitated were devoured, and she was determined never to be anyone's meal. But tonight, standing in the center of all that forced elegance, watching wealthy people laugh and drink and pretend to enjoy themselves while mentally calculating whose career they could step on next, Astrid felt something cold and hard settling deep in her chest, pressing against her lungs until breathing became a conscious effort. She was exhausted in a way sleep could not fix. The third quarter numbers had been brutal. A perfect storm of supply chain disasters and competitor innovations that had carved 15% off Sterling's projected revenue. 2 board members had questioned her strategy during last week's meeting, their words carefully chosen to sound like concern rather than attack, but unmistakably hostile beneath the corporate politeness. Wilfred Hargrove, the board chairman, had made a point of mentioning that the European partners were growing impatient with Sterling's lack of cultural finesse, its American bluntness in negotiations that required delicacy. The subtext was clear as crystal: prove yourself capable of managing international relationships, or step aside for someone who can. The message had been delivered with a smile, over coffee in his office, as if he were doing her a favor by being so direct. Astrid had smiled back and thanked him for the feedback, then gone to her own office and stood at the window for 20 minutes, hands pressed flat against the cold glass, trying to remember how to breathe normally. So she had thrown this party, sparing absolutely no expense, inviting every investor and journalist and power broker who mattered in the New York business community. The budget had made her CFO wince, but she had overridden his objections with cold certainty. She needed them to see Sterling Global as invincible, sophisticated, internationally competent, untouchable. She needed to erase any lingering doubt that she, a woman who had started her career answering phones in a real estate office in Queens, belonged at the top of a multinational corporation, but standing in the middle of all this carefully orchestrated excess, watching people perform enjoyment while secretly measuring her for a coffin. Astrid felt like she was suffocating. That was when she saw him, the janitor, moving quietly along the edge of the ballroom with a cleaning cart, trying to stay invisible while he cleared abandoned glasses and straightened chairs. His uniform was old but clean. The Sterling Global logo faded across the chest. He kept his eyes down, methodical in his work. But there was something in the careful way he moved that irritated Astrid beyond reason. Maybe it was the way he seemed untouched by the spectacle around him. Maybe it was the fact that he represented everything she was trying to hide the cracks in the foundation. The ordinary people doing ordinary work while she pretended to command empires. Or maybe it was just that she needed someone to hurt. And he was there. Finn Carter had been working at Sterling Global for 2 years, always the night shift, always alone. He was 34, with the kind of quiet face that people looked past without noticing. His hands were rough from years of physical work, his shoulders permanently hunched from bending over mops and trash bins. He had learned early that the best way to survive in a place like this was to be invisible. Keep your head down. Do your job. Don't make eye contact with anyone who matters. It was a simple formula, and it had kept him employed long enough to cover rent, groceries, and his daughter's medical expenses. Louisa was 7 years old. With her mother's bright eyes and her father's quiet determination, she was the reason Finn dragged himself to work every night, the reason he swallowed his pride when managers barked orders, the reason he stayed invisible even when every instinct screamed to fight back. Louisa needed stability. She needed insurance. She needed a father who showed up. Even if showing up meant scrubbing floors in a building full of people who would never learn his name. Finn had made peace with that bargain, or at least, he thought he had. Tonight was supposed to be an easy shift. The party would run late. But Finn's job was simple: stay out of sight, clean up spills before anyone complained, and leave before the guests started asking uncomfortable questions about who cleaned up after their excess. He had worked dozens of corporate events, had perfected the art of blending into wallpaper, but tonight felt different. The energy in the room was aggressive, almost desperate. The laughter too loud, the smiles too forced. Finn could feel the tension radiating off the CEO every time she moved through the crowd, her posture rigid, her eyes scanning like a hawk looking for weakness. He was wiping down a high-top table near the stage when he heard his name. Not his real name, just the generic summons that people used when they did not care enough to ask. "Hey, you." Finn looked up and found himself staring directly at Astrid Sterling. She was 10 feet away, champagne glass in hand, surrounded by a half-circle of executives who watched her with the wary attention of prey animals. Her face was beautiful in the way sharp things are beautiful, elegant, precise, dangerous. "Come here," Astrid said. It was not a request. Finn glanced toward George Lane, the head of security, hoping for some kind of intervention. George met his eyes for a fraction of a second, then looked away. No help there. Finn set down his cleaning rag and walked toward the CEO, acutely aware of how his uniform looked under the chandelier light, how his work boots sounded against the polished floor. The crowd parted slightly as he approached, people leaning back to avoid contact, noses wrinkling as if poverty were contagious. Astrid tilted her head, studying him with the cold curiosity of someone examining an insect. "We're having a little fun tonight," she said, her voice carrying across the ballroom. "Singing carols, building team spirit. You know Last Christmas, don't you?" The question was rhetorical, mocking. A few people laughed. Finn opened his mouth to decline politely, to excuse himself and vanish back into the shadows where he belonged. But then he saw Clinton Voss standing just behind Astrid, the CFO's face arranged in a smile that did not reach his eyes. Clinton had been laying groundwork for months, quietly undermining Astrid in board meetings, spreading whispers about her lack of leadership. This moment was a gift to him. If Astrid humiliated a janitor in front of international partners, Clinton could spin it into a scandal. If she showed mercy, he could call her weak. Either way, she was trapped, and Finn was the bait. Beatrix Moore, the event coordinator, appeared at Finn's elbow with a microphone. Her expression was apologetic but firm. This was her job. She handed him the mic, and someone in the crowd whistled mockingly. Finn looked at the device in his hands, felt the weight of hundreds of eyes pressing down on him, and thought about Louisa asleep at home. He thought about the overdue medical bills stacked on his kitchen counter. He thought about how much it would cost to find another job with benefits. Then he thought about something else, something buried deep, from a life he had left behind. Finn Carter had not always been a janitor. Once, a lifetime ago, he had been someone else entirely. Someone who spoke 5 languages fluently and had negotiated trade deals in Geneva, translated for diplomats in Brussels, and solved cultural crises for corporations too arrogant to understand the people they were trying to impress. He had been good at it. Exceptional, even. But that was before his wife got sick. Before the hospital bills piled up faster than insurance could cover them. Before he made the choice to abandon his career and become a full-time caregiver. To spend his wife's last 6 months holding her hand instead of flying to conferences. After she died, Finn could not go back. The grief was too heavy. The corporate world too brutal. He needed something simple, something quiet, something that would not demand more than he had left to give. So he became invisible. He took a job that let him work nights while Louisa slept. That offered health insurance and did not ask questions about the gaps in his resume. He buried the man he used to be and told himself it did not matter. But standing on that stage, microphone in hand, with a room full of people waiting to laugh at him, Finn felt something old and stubborn rising in his chest. He looked at Astrid Sterling, saw the exhaustion hidden behind her cruelty, and made a decision. If she wanted a performance, he would give her one, just not the kind she expected. The music started. Last Christmas. The opening notes, syrupy and familiar, designed to evoke nostalgia and warmth. Finn closed his eyes for a moment, found the melody, and began to sing. His voice was low and steady, rougher than it used to be, but still clear. He sang in English first, the lyrics simple and sad, a story about love given and wasted. The crowd laughed, but the sound was uncertain now. Finn was not stumbling. He was not off-key. He was actually good. Astrid's smile flickered. She had expected humiliation, not competence. Across the room, Rosalind Drake, the head of PR, felt her stomach drop. This was going to be a problem. When Finn finished the first verse, he did not stop. He did not hand back the microphone or retreat to safety. Instead, he shifted seamlessly into French, his pronunciation flawless, his phrasing smooth as silk. The laughter stopped completely. People leaned forward, confused, intrigued. Henry Caldwell, the European investor who had flown in from Paris that morning, set down his champagne glass and stared. He knew the difference between high school French and native fluency. What he was hearing was the latter. Finn moved into Spanish next, his voice warming with the language, the rhythm shifting into something more passionate. A woman near the stage whispered to her companion, asking who this man was. No one had an answer. Clinton Voss stopped smiling. Wilfred Hargrove straightened in his chair, his eyes narrowing with sudden interest. Astrid felt the air in the room change, felt control slipping away from her and toward the man on stage. She wanted to stop him, to cut the performance short and reassert her dominance. But she could not. Not now. Not without looking petty and afraid. German came next, precise and powerful, each word clipped and intentional, the language of engineers and philosophers. delivered with the kind of confidence that comes from years of practice. Finn's eyes were open now, scanning the crowd. No longer a victim, but a performer in full command of his craft. He found Astrid's gaze and held it, singing directly to her, and for the first time all night. She looked away first. The final language was Italian, soft and aching, each syllable a small heartbreak. Finn sang about giving his heart away, about trust and loss and the long winter that follows betrayal. When the last note faded, the ballroom was silent. Then someone started clapping. Then someone else. Within seconds. The applause was thunderous, people on their feet, mouths open in genuine amazement. Finn stood in the center of it all, breathing hard, microphone loose in his hand. He had just done the one thing he swore he would never do again. He had made himself visible. Henry Caldwell was the first to reach the stage. He moved with the brisk efficiency of someone used to making decisions quickly. His hand extended before Finn could step down. "Where did you learn to speak like that?" he asked, his accent thick with approval. Finn hesitated, suddenly aware of how many people were listening. "I used to work in translation," he said quietly. "Before this." Henry's eyebrows rose. He turned to Astrid, who had gone very still near the bar. "You have someone this talented cleaning floors?" The question was not accusatory, just genuinely baffled. Astrid opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. She had no answer. She had not known. She had not asked. She had assumed. Rosalind Drake was already calculating damage control, her phone half raised as she debated whether to delete the videos people were already uploading to private channels. This could go viral in the worst way. CEO humiliates employee. Employee reveals hidden talent. Company looks cruel and stupid. Or it could be spun into something positive, if they moved fast enough. But everything depended on what happened next. On whether Astrid Sterling could swallow her pride and make this right, before anyone could speak. A voice cut through the murmur of conversation. It was Wilfred Hargrove, standing now, his presence commanding immediate attention. "We have a problem," he said calmly. "Our translator for tomorrow's negotiation just canceled. Snowstorm grounded her flight in Boston." He looked at Finn, then at Astrid. "Unless anyone has a better idea, I suggest we ask this gentleman if he is available." The words landed like stones in still water. Clinton Voss went pale. Astrid felt the trap snap shut around her. If she said yes, she admitted to wasting talent. If she said no, she sabotaged her own company out of spite. Either way, she lost. Finn stood very still, understanding what was happening but not quite believing it. Tomorrow morning, Sterling Global was supposed to finalize a massive contract with a consortium of European investors. The deal was worth millions, possibly enough to secure Astrid's position for another year. Without a competent translator, the whole thing could collapse over a single misunderstood clause. He could save them, or he could walk away and let them drown. He thought about Louisa again, about the choice he had made to stay invisible, to stay safe. Then he thought about the look on Astrid's face when she pointed at him and said, "Sing." The humiliation in her voice, the casual cruelty. "I can do it," Finn said quietly. "If you want." Astrid stared at him, and for just a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Not gratitude, not quite shame, just a flash of recognition, as if she were seeing him as a person for the first time. "Fine," she said, her voice flat. "Be here at 8. Then she turned and walked toward the exit, her heels clicking against the marble, her shoulders rigid with suppressed rage. The party continued around them, but the energy had shifted. People were no longer performing confidence. They were whispering, speculating, watching. Clinton Voss disappeared into a side hallway, phone pressed to his ear, already planning his next move. He had worked too hard to let some janitor ruin his carefully constructed path to power. If Finn succeeded tomorrow, Astrid would look competent. If Finn failed, Clinton could blame her for relying on unqualified staff. The trick was making sure Finn failed in exactly the right way. Clinton made 2 calls before midnight. The first was to building security, instructing them to revoke Finn's access to the executive floors. Just a precaution, he said. A scheduling error. The second call was to his assistant, telling her to delay the morning meeting by 30 minutes without informing Astrid. Small sabotages, enough to create chaos, enough to make Astrid look incompetent when it mattered most. Finn went home just after midnight, his hands shaking as he unlocked the apartment door. Louisa was asleep in her bed, her stuffed rabbit tucked under one arm, her breathing soft and even. He stood in the doorway for a long time, watching her, trying to remember why he had agreed to step back into the world that had chewed him up once before. Then he went to the kitchen and pulled an old briefcase from the back of the closet. Inside were files he had not touched in 2 years. Contracts, glossaries, notes in 4 different languages. He spread them across the table and started reviewing, his mind shifting back into patterns he thought he had forgotten. By the time the sun rose, Finn had not slept, but he was ready. The meeting was scheduled for 8 in the morning, in a conference room on the 47th floor. Finn arrived at 7:30, dressed in the only suit he still owned, a decade out of style but clean and pressed. He rode the elevator up, his heart pounding, his mouth dry. When the doors opened, George Lane was waiting. "Can't let you up here," George said, looking genuinely apologetic. "Orders from upstairs. Access revoked." Finn stared at him. "I'm supposed to translate a meeting. The CEO told me to be here." George shrugged. "I'm just doing my job, man. Sorry." Astrid arrived at 7:45, expecting to find Finn waiting in the conference room. Instead, she found Henry Caldwell pacing near the windows, Wilfred Hargrove checking his watch with increasing irritation, and no translator in sight. "Where is he?" Wilfred asked sharply. Astrid felt ice spreading through her chest. She called down to security, demanded to know where Finn Carter was. George explained the access issue, mentioned Clinton's authorization. Astrid closed her eyes. She understood immediately. Clinton was making his move. He wanted her to fail, and he was willing to destroy the deal to make it happen. For a long moment, Astrid stood frozen, paralyzed by the realization that she had built a company culture where her own CFO would sabotage her, where cruelty was rewarded and competence punished. Then she made a choice. She opened her phone and called George directly. "Override the restriction," she said. "Use my authorization. Get him up here now." There was a pause. "Are you sure?" George asked. "That's going to cause problems with Clinton." Astrid looked at herself in the glass reflection, saw the exhaustion and fear she had been hiding for months. "I don't care," she said. "Do it." Finn stepped out of the elevator at 7:58, his heart still racing from the confrontation downstairs. Astrid was waiting in the hallway. Their eyes met, and for a moment, neither spoke. Then Astrid said, very quietly, "Thank you for coming." It was not an apology, not yet, but it was something. Finn nodded once and followed her into the conference room. The negotiation lasted 4 grueling hours. Henry Caldwell and his European partner sat on one side of the massive conference table, their expressions polite but ruthless, their questions probing every clause with surgical precision. Finn sat between the 2 groups, his voice steady as he translated not just words but intent, catching the subtle shifts in tone that could derail everything. His hands no longer trembled. His voice did not waver. This was who he used to be, and muscle memory was returning with every sentence. When the European team raised concerns about delivery timelines, Finn switched to French, his explanation flowing naturally as he clarified the logistics. Then he shifted to German to detail the manufacturing constraints, his tone respectful but firm. The Europeans nodded, satisfied. Astrid watched from her seat, barely breathing, realizing for the first time what real competence looked like when it was not hidden behind a mop and bucket. Clinton Voss sat across from her, his jaw tight, his eyes calculating. He was waiting for Finn to fail, waiting for the moment when he could swoop in and blame Astrid for relying on unqualified staff. But that moment never came. Instead, halfway through the meeting, Clinton tried to slip a liability clause into the contract, the language deliberately vague, designed to protect Sterling from responsibility while leaving European partners exposed to risk. Finn caught it immediately. He paused mid-translation, his eyes scanning the document, then looked up and asked a clarifying question in Italian, his tone carefully neutral. Henry frowned, asked Finn to translate the clause word for word, with no interpretation. Finn did exactly that, and the ambiguity became instantly obvious. The room went silent. Wilfred Hargrove leaned forward, his voice cold as steel. "Explain this clause, Clinton." Clinton stammered, tried to backtrack, claimed it was standard language. Henry shook his head slowly. "This is not standard. This is deliberate obfuscation." Astrid felt something shift inside her chest. She could have defended Clinton, could have tried to smooth things over, could have protected him the way she always protected her team. Instead, she leaned forward and said clearly, "Remove the clause entirely. We negotiate in good faith, or we do not negotiate at all." Clinton's face went pale. Wilfred's expression remained neutral, but something like approval flickered in his eyes. By noon, the contract was signed. Henry shook Finn's hand with genuine warmth, told him he was the best translator he had worked with in years. Wilfred pulled Astrid aside and said, "That man just saved your career. Don't waste him." Then he left, taking the signed documents with him. The room emptied slowly, until only Astrid, Finn, and Rosalind remained. Rosalind had spent the morning gathering evidence, emails from Clinton ordering the access restriction, text messages discussing how to delay the meeting, financial records showing irregularities in the charity fund. Money moved in ways that did not quite add up. She laid it all on the table in front of Astrid. "He was planning to frame you for the missing funds," Rosalind said quietly. "Make it look like you were embezzling." Astrid stared at the papers, feeling something cold and sharp settling into her bones. She had known Clinton was ambitious. She had not realized he was willing to commit fraud to get what he wanted. Clinton Voss was escorted out of the building by security at 2 p.m. Wilfred Hargrove had seen the evidence and made the decision in under 5 minutes. No second chances, no quiet resignations, just a clean, brutal removal. By evening, the entire company knew. By morning, the industry would know. Astrid watched it happen from her office window, feeling nothing, just a vast, empty exhaustion. She found Finn in the break room an hour later, drinking coffee from a paper cup, still wearing the suit that did not quite fit. "I owe you an apology," Astrid said. Finn looked up, surprised. "For last night? For how I treated you? For all of it?" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I can offer you a position, head of cultural liaison, better pay, better hours. You would be good at it." Finn set down his coffee. "Why are you offering?" he asked. "Because I'm useful, or because you know what you did was wrong." Astrid flinched, The question was fair. She thought about lying, about giving him the easy answer. Then she decided she was tired of easy answers. "Both," she said. "I was cruel because I was afraid. That's not an excuse. It's just the truth." Finn studied her for a long moment. Then he said, "I need to think about it." Astrid nodded. "Take all the time you need." She turned to leave, then stopped. "For what it's worth," she said quietly. "You were extraordinary today. You deserved better than what I gave you." Finn watched her walk away, and for the first time in 2 years, he felt something shift inside his chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, but maybe the beginning of it, 1 year later. Sterling Global held another Christmas party. This time, the energy was different, softer, more genuine. Astrid had spent 12 months rebuilding the company culture, implementing policies that protected workers, creating scholarship programs for employees' children, learning to lead with something other than fear. It was slow, exhausting work. But it was work that mattered. Finn Carter stood near the stage, dressed in a suit that actually fit, watching Louisa laugh with a group of children near the dessert table. He had taken the job Astrid offered, had slowly rebuilt the career he thought he had lost forever. The work was good, the pay was fair, and for the first time since his wife died, he felt like himself again. Beatrix Moore approached him with a microphone and a shy smile. "Would you sing something?" she asked. "Not because anyone's making you, just because we'd like to hear it." Finn looked at Astrid across the room. She met his eyes and gave a small nod. Permission, not command. He took the microphone and sang "Last Christmas." Just once, just in English. His voice was warm and clear, and when he finished, people applauded not because they were shocked, but because they were grateful. Astrid stood in the back of the room, watching, and felt something she had not felt in years. Not pride, not power. Just the quiet satisfaction of knowing she had finally done something right. Outside, snow fell softly against the windows, turning the city into something clean and new. Inside, people laughed and talked and sang, and for one night at least, it felt like Christmas.